Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Flat Earth UK Live. Joining me tonight is an Army veteran radio officer with experience in every type of telecommunications and radio transmissions you could possibly hope to know about. Robin Poe, welcome back to Flat Earth UK Live.
Hello, and greetings from a absolutely sunny day, an unusual sunny day in Newcastle, Washington.
You know, I've got a feeling of deja vu. Greetings from Warwickshire. On tonight's show, we will be discussing people's reaction to the flat Earth. We will also be discussing previous experiences that may have led to the conclusion in past life that the world was flat, past life in history. Also, we'll be looking at flat Earth mockery and some very real flat Earth proof from Robin Poe herself. Religious connections to the flat Earth. We'll be looking at satellites, possibly some made of metal. We'll also be looking at CERN, and if we get time, we will get on to psychopaths. I've said it before, but it will be a massive flat Earth reality sandwich. So Robin, can you kick us off, as you have done before, by telling us, how did you find out the Earth is flat?
Well, it started out with, you know how you're always searching for things on YouTube, and I was looking at the fakery involved in the Mars Curiosity rover. It was just too horribly fake, and it was driving me nuts. So I had to look at some stuff on it. And in the sidebar, you have all the related type of videos, and there was a compilation of Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues done by another person who put them together. It's called Under the Dome. So I clicked on it and started listening to it, and it was making a lot of sense. And I was still kind of holding out until I got to the video I found this video by P-Brain about the sun and the moon, because that was really bothering me. How do the sun and the moon work? And I started looking at that, and that was kind of like the nail in the coffin for the globe for me. And except for I wanted to see it for myself. So I did go out onto the Puget Sound, looked at some things that were X number of miles away, and it should not be able to see so much curvature. You know, I should be seeing things blocked, like the boat holes should have been blocked by maybe 10 feet. I should have only seen the tops of the boats, and I was seeing all the way to the water with binoculars. And so I said, that was it for me. I said, it's flat. There's no curvature. So, and that pretty much sold me.
I mean, one thing you said last time we chatted was about sort of which flat Earth video did you watch first, or which video were you watching when you came across a flat Earth video? And that seems to be a bit of a recurring theme. Do you think YouTube are switching people onto this deliberately?
I don't know. I think it's just that people tend to look at some of these conspiracy or NASA fakery, and so it's sort of, you know, the NASA fakery is sort of related to flat Earth research. So I think that's what it was, because in the Curiosity rover fakery was just the worst I have ever seen. It was like terrible.
Yeah,
so,
it seems to fit into two categories. You're either finding, you know, evidence to convince yourself by debunking globe proof, or actually seeing genuine flat Earth facts, and like you say, looking at the ship's hull. And I mean, was there a point that you went, no, this is it, I am fully flat Earth?
I think it was when I actually went out and did that little curvature observation for myself. That's when it really sunk in. And I highly recommend that if anybody's looking into the flat Earth, that they do go out and make these observations themselves, because it'll really hit it home to you that, you know, you've seen it with your own eyes. You can't just say, well, they don't know what they're talking about, because then you'd have to say you didn't know what you're talking about. So
I mean, I'll post an Earth curve calculator in the link once this goes out. But I did it with one of the guests so far, and I think it's something that I should highlight in every show, perhaps. But can you talk us through? And it's fairly simple, but the maths that we should be using if there was a curve.
Yeah, I didn't even actually use the calculator. I just, you know, did the math in my head. But it's basically very simple. It's 8 inches times the number of miles away that you're looking, times the number of miles away that you're looking. So 8 inches times the number of miles distance squared. So it's just miles times itself times 8 inches. And
I'm sure I saw Morgile doing like the reverse one where you times by 0.66666 or something like that. Does that sound familiar?
yeah, that's the one that gives it to you in feet. So I have that one on a little calculator that I built, you know, out of Excel, an Excel sheet. Eventually, I want to do a video on how you can take Excel and you can make a distance to horizon calculation, a curvature calculation, and those kinds of things. Because then people can do it themselves, you know.
I mean, there's definitely some out there. I know on Jeranism's show before last, he was talking about a fantastic site that he'd found that had got, you know, every variable that you could possibly plot in there already on an Excel worked out for you. So there's definitely links to these things. It's simple enough to do.
I guess it's just easier just to calculate it up in my head and say, okay, that's going to be that much. And, you know, if I started getting into lots of miles, I might have to use a calculator. So, but you know, but you can see these things with your eyes. I mean, to study flat Earth, basically you're studying the place where you live. So it's not that hard.
No, not at all. I mean, it's just a case of looking.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I was going to just more or less sort of try and duplicate what we did last time, although we've had several hours with each other on video call now, so it's a bit more comfy and easy. But I mean, one of the things I want to sort of get out there is how people cope with flat Earth once they've got it in their life. And the way I put it to you last time, although I now know the answer, was sort of, have you shared this with friends or, you know, your church associates, or how have you got this out there or not got it out there, as the case may be?
Well, I did share a video with, or I mean, I did share with my friend that I was going out to after church to make these observations on the Puget Sound to see. I said, I think there's something I might find out that's very interesting, and it might be very remarkable. And that's all I said to her. She said, well, I'm intrigued. Let me know what you find. And so when I got back, I said, this is what I found. There is no curvature on our Earth. The Earth is flat. And then I sent her Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues and P. Brain's Sun and Moon Dynamics.
Did you watch all of Mark's actual clues back to back, or did you just watch the shortened version that you mentioned?
Well, no, this one was about an hour and a half. I mean, it compiled all of them. So it was like a long, I mean, I just kind of kept watching them going, because I was quite mesmerized by it. It's like, this is something very new and it's making sense, you know. And occasionally I would stop the video and say, just start checking something like the airline maps or something like that. It was like, wow, this is exactly right. I mean, this isn't some, you know, somebody trying to give you some bull. I mean, it's like very true. And the other thing too is I like
the interaction with Mark's videos. Like you say, you immediately start looking at the flight plans.
Yeah. and the other thing is I also went back, you know, since I worked in radio communications in the military, and went back and started looking at, you know, in signal school, they give you a lot of numbers and stuff, and you just accept them, you know, like all the Earth satellites or the communication satellites are 22,234 miles in the air. You know, in fact, when I was in the military, our theme song when I was in Europe was Calling America by Electric Light Orchestra, because it talked about the satellites 20,000 miles in the sky, you know, and all that. So, but anyway, so I started looking.
I was going to say, go on. Just before we went out live, you were sort of very, you know, not tiptoeing around it, but telling me about a subject that you're looking into and possibly going to make a video on. And obviously, I'm really keen for you to talk about that on my show. But can you sort of fill us in?
Well, this is something I as I said before, I did look at a lot of the radio things that we had planning distances for curvature, but I also worked with radio satellite communications, and I started looking at the declination or the degrees of elevation that we would put these satellite dishes, you know, how high up they would be. elevated, right? And I started thinking about it, and I said, they're not at the degrees of elevation that they're using. They're not going to be shooting at a 22,000 miles up in the sky, you know, because I just did the trigonometry, and it's like between 600 miles and 1,000 miles. And, you know, I'm going to do a video that'll go into more detail about how I determined this by calculation. But you
saw a video that someone else had made as well?
Yeah, I saw this video by GeoShifter where he came up with an idea about what satellites really are. And he did some cute little animations too. But
fill us in.
Huh? Oh,
fill
okay.
us in on what you got from his video or hers.
Well, the thing, I think he's from Germany, I think. But anyway, he said that there's all these people manufacturing satellites. So why are they doing this if it doesn't do anything? And so he looked at some promotional videos of some of these companies, and they have these tanks on the side that are ostensibly rockets, but he said they look more like very, very lightweight, you know, like tanks that you would put helium in or something. So
what shape were they?
They were about, from the video I could see they were about 8 feet long on either side of the communications array, or there's like 4 of them, and they're about maybe 12 to 18 inches in diameter, and like a long cylinder, just like a gas cylinder that you would put gas in, or, you know, helium or something in. And he determined that because they're very thin walled and very lightweight, that they couldn't be rockets because they didn't have any of the firing mechanisms on the bottom. They were just gas tanks. And so he thought they must be filling them with helium and then treating them like balloons, but because they were metallic, they wouldn't explode. And so, and he determined about how high they would go up, and it actually matched up with some of the calculations that I had been doing about where these satellite dishes would be pointed. And I also checked it against the little TV satellite dish I have on the side of my house here, and it's the same kind of height, about 600 to 1,000 miles above the Earth. So he might be onto something there. I think he is. And I'm going to try to.
We said just before the show that, you know, hopefully we don't get on to psychopaths this early, but sort of hiding the truth in plain sight for a bit of duper's delight might be an example to be had from Mythbusters when they made a lead balloon.
Oh, you know, yeah.
Helium balloon out of metal.
Yeah, so if they could make it out of lead, I mean, if these tanks appeared to be like some kind of, you know, aluminum titanium alloy, super lightweight or something like that. So, you know, if they can do it out of lead, I think they could make these work very well. And they wouldn't have the problem of once you get up to a certain height, the balloon, you know, pops because it gets too overinflated and falls back to the Earth. So I don't know. I think he may be onto something there. Yeah.
Hopefully the maths will show something, you know, if you keep your notebook to hand.
Yeah. Yep, I got it right here, my notebook. Everybody should keep a notebook. Flat Earth notebook.
I mean, I want to get to the juiciest bit of your story, if you like, which is, well, let's just say a few years ago, you to my mind found out the Earth was flat before the penny dropped, as I would phrase it. Can you tell us all about how that came to pass?
Well, the thing is, I went back and I started researching, you know, re-looking at some of the radio communications setups that we had when I was in the military with the antenna relays over the mountaintops and everything. And, you know, we would have these shots where you would, you know, I started looking at the numbers that I was working with. And
before we get onto that, I want to keep this really basic and lay it out in really layman's terms. So when you say shots and relays, can you describe in really simplistic terms what you mean?
Okay, so you have like 2 antennas that are pointing at each other, right? And they're unidirectional antennas because you want to concentrate the energy between in one direction, right? So but you have to line them up, and and so we call that just a radio shot. But anyway, we lost, and the relays, they'll go from one like base down in Pisa we had, and it would go up to another base up west of Verona, and we would have these little relays across the mountaintops that would carry the signal all the way up there. And we lost a relay, had some interference, so we had to move it. And so I moved it to this new mountain, and we still couldn't get the other relay. There was another relay down by Ferraro, which is where they make the Ferraris. Everybody likes those. And it wouldn't come in. So I just took the radio shot and moved it from Ferraro and pointed it to the base west of Verona. And it came right in. I didn't even need that radio relay. But the thing that was amazing about it is it was a 115-mile shot. And the planning range on these radios for one to the other is 30 miles. And so, but it came in beautifully, and then we had good gain, good signal. You know, it was a great shot. It worked good. And then my company commander calls me, says, "Is that radio shot down to west of Verona coming in?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it's just fine. It's working great." And he says, "Well, I don't like it." And he made me take it down.
So was he actually there? Or was this just over the phone, so to speak? I mean, how was it wasn't liked communicated to you?
Well, he was actually communicating me over the phone through the link. So
oh, right. So he's talking to you through a 115-mile, you know, with direct line of sight, working perfectly, and he says, "I don't like this."
And he made me take it down because it wasn't in the planning ranges for the radio, because, you know, it wasn't by the book or whatever. And the thing is the reason they had this 30 miles is that they said curvature would start to interfere after about 30 miles. So apparently, when I looked back, because none of it made sense to me back then, it was crazy. But then looking back, that it was, at that time, you know, it was obvious there was no curvature there. It just didn't sink in until later on, when I watched the videos, you know, and started thinking about it, like, wait a minute, I took this shot on this radio. And you know, Bob, who's he's on Jeranism. I think he calls himself Xanadude, but
co-host.
Yeah, the co-host. He's one of the co-hosts. Yeah, on Jeranism, and he actually works in radios as well. And so it's not just me, because he's actually done microwave shots across flat land, you know, 60 miles, and you're almost under 5,000 feet of curvature there. You know, I mean, it shouldn't work. So
in terms of, I mean, again, this was based on something that my wife had said after watching the last show, which didn't actually manage to make it to an archive. But she said, well, do they bend? Couldn't they bend around the curvature of the Earth, these radio shots? And, you know, you think, well, I haven't questioned that because I know the answer. But again, can you give us a bit of a...
well, yes, I actually, when I looked at how much curvature would interfere, because these radios, they will tend to curve down a little bit at about 4/3 curvature of the Earth, right? And so I even added that factor in, and there was still mountains and mountains of curvature in the way of these shots. So, I mean, the curvature, the 4/3 curvature bending of the radio waves would only account for a small portion of that. You know, we're not talking, you know, 1,000 feet. No, it's not going to account for 1,000 feet of interference from curvature. So.
Yeah, at 115 miles, it's so far beyond any sort of margin of error that it's just, it couldn't have worked unless the Earth was flat.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's superb proof. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Well, I was on a high mountain, but even then I accounted for that plus the curvature, and it still was like, I think it was about 3,000 feet of curvature interference should have been there that wasn't. So, you know, so even that radio curving is not going to make a big difference.
I mean, do you think you're going to spread this more and more in your general day-to-day life now that you've got flat Earth in your life? Does it rule your evenings and your YouTube viewing habits as much as it does some people? I mean, how has it taken over your life so far?
Well, I've been a bit of a binge watcher of flat Earth videos, but it's starting to be to the point where I want to start making more flat Earth videos, and I did make one on, you know, ISS and the gravity effects on the ISS. And, you know, like I say, I did make some math mistakes, but the thing is the little mistakes only opened up a whole nother can of worms about problems on the ISS. So I've got
Oh, really? Oh, this is news. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Well, this was something where I was starting to work on like drag coefficients, because even though it's in my book, anyway, everybody should make their own little flat Earth video notebook of their notes, but because you'll think of things and you want to write them down, because these things are going to be important. But anyway, I started looking at, this was I think last night, because I've become obsessed with math now. So I started looking at drag coefficient formulas, because even though they're up in the supposed orbit, they're in the thermosphere, and there is still molecules of air there, and they're superheated molecules of air. And I started looking, if you use drag coefficient, because if you have drag, that means you have a pressure being applied to the forward surfaces of the ISS. So if you have these forward surfaces have this pressure on them, because they say, well, the air's too thin for this heat, you know, in the thermosphere, which is about 2,000 degrees to affect the ISS.
Plasma layer, right?
Yeah, they're in the thermosphere. They're right in the middle of the thermosphere. And so I said, but this drag coefficient is going to put a localized pressure on the forward leading edges of the ISS. And it's going at 7,700 miles per second. So that's fast. So that means that you're going to have a lot of drag coefficient pressure building up on the forward edges of it, which is going to concentrate those molecules on the forward edges of the ISS. And why aren't these forward edges melting away? You know, they should be melting away. At least the forward edges, because you're going to have localized pressure there. And I'm doing some formulas. I haven't gotten all the numbers, but I have a feeling it's going to be quite toasty in there. You know.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's new information. But do you want to talk us through your video that you just made about? I think was it a week ago? No, it was a couple of days ago, wasn't it?
It was since just before our last talk. But anyway, the thing is I started looking at that at the ISS, they would be subjected to 87% of Earth's gravity, right? And so that's an awful low orbit. But they claim that because the ISS is moving at 77, I gotta look at my drag coefficient equation here. Okay, so it's moving at, yeah, it's like 7,700 miles and change, right? 7,795 meters per second, right?
Very, very, very fast.
Very fast. And I think actually the space shuttle doesn't even go that fast, which I'm still trying to figure that one out. I haven't done all the calculations on this. So they claim that puts them in free fall at 435 miles above the Earth, which is, to my mind, a very unstable orbit. Because, like, for instance, they're going to have a lot of drag, even from highly rarefied thermosphere atmosphere, because, you know, they're just going too damn fast. That is really, really fast. I mean, just air friction alone, let alone being in the thermosphere, is going to cause some problems, even when the air is very rarefied. That's just... And the
heliocentric model in general, it seems, are going to be the undoing of their lies, because all of the speeds from just the very speed the globe spins at are phenomenal, and they only get faster from there, you know. So they've got to keep up with all of these ridiculous speeds.
Well, because it's only 435 miles in the air, they have to have this huge speed in order to say that they're free falling past the curve. You know, and things, how are they maintaining that speed? I mean, they say that they have drag, that they have to boost it every few months or so, but I want to look at these drag coefficient factors and see if that's completely garbage, you know, because I'm not accepting any of their numbers. I'm not. I'm doing the math. And, you know, if nothing else, you can point out where I've made my mistakes, but at least I'm making them look at, you know.
Well, as I'm sure I said this last time, but in your video, you go through the maths in some detail, and then you cut to, and this is what it looks like, and you use a little bit of footage from the ISS.
How can they do this, right?
Yeah, it's a shame you didn't. I mean, maybe I'm just picturing this, but did it have the guitar in there by any chance?
Yeah, the guitar one, which I thought was just ridiculously cheesy, you know. So
it annoys me when you see them doing stuff that's sort of semi-Hollywood, and you just go, "What are you doing? You guys are." It's just so expensive to be up there, and you're in mortal danger continually. What? You're playing the guitar and sending out tweets? What's going on?
putting physics in the middle of a water globule, you know, I mean.
Oh, dear.
I mean, that's not what kind of.
It's back to sort of Tiger Dan's ideas of what's going on up there. I mean, obviously, there's a light in the sky. I can't remember whether you said you'd actually seen it before or not. Have you actually seen what goes past in the sky?
Well, I think there's more than one, because for instance, when I was a little kid, I saw something that looks very much like the ISS, you know, a little dot going across the sky rather fast. And I said, "Dad, what's that?" And he says, "Oh, that's one of the satellites." And, you know, I mean, you think it's hard to see the ISS, you know, because they say you couldn't possibly see it that high up if it is as big as small as it is. But these, you know, the excuse they used back then was it's a satellite. Well, the communication satellites back then were, if they existed, were a little better than a tinfoil covered basketball. Now, how are you going to see that from the ground? You know, I mean, there's something up there, and it may have always been up there, you know.
Yeah, I think that may be the case. I mean, I've said this before, but my folks used to live in an area of Britain that's got a very low level of light pollution up in Shropshire, and at night it was astonishing, you know, and you could see. Again, I can't use any other words, but satellites going by, and this is before I was a flat earther. And like you say, you just assume that's a satellite, but then when you wrap your head around what they show you on the ground and how big that is and the heights that are involved, there's no way you could see anything going by. But there is stuff there, you know, there's definitely stuff floating on by.
Oh, and there was another video. Who was it that put it out? I'm trying to think of his name. But he's got one where he took a telescope shot. He was able to capture it on telescope. And he says, you know what this looks like? It doesn't look, the ISS, the shape of it almost looks like one of these spy planes that we're not supposed to have anymore. And, you know, and you could even still.
Totally buy that. Totally buy that.
If I find that video, I'll send it to you. But it's like you can actually, it says, well, if they just put some pods of some kind on it, would look just like the ISS, but it would be at a lower altitude, like, you know, mid-stratosphere, you know, upper stratosphere or something, as opposed to further up in this thermosphere. But I said, well, and it wouldn't even have to be fakery. If you have a spy plane, these just might be sensor modules or spy modules, you know, or cameras or something on there. You know,
so you think there might actually be something up there with people on it?
Well, it may be a spy plane that's actually, and the thing is if it is a spy plane, the way it would, you know, fly around the Earth, right? It would take pictures, and it would be able to relay back these pictures, and it would look very much like an ISS, you know, showing us how it's flying over the Earth. You know, add a little bit of curve, take a good fisheye lens, and, you know, you got it.
Yeah, but that's not what they give us. I mean, when you watch the ISS feed, it really does look like a dodgy CGI image. I mean, it occasionally stops. You know, there's things that happen on that feed that are terrible.
Well, you know, a spy plane occasionally has to land and refuel, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally feasible. It could be a spy plane, you know. The ones that the program we don't have anymore, the spy plane program. Oh, we're not doing that anymore, you
Hmm.
know. And he
Yeah.
even got a
Matt
found a
Fowler had similar ideas, was saying similar stuff about the spy planes, that
yeah,
or even he was using it in reference to the 17 mission, where they got, the blue marble, the very best picture. They were taking real pictures, and they were very good. So you've got to ask yourself, why don't they have stuff that's of that sort of degree of quality for the ISS feed? Maybe it's just easier to do a rubbish job.
well, no, I think here's what it is, and this is my thought, I've done a little bit of thinking about this. The thing is whenever you have the people go up with a balloon like the dog cam sport or any like the go fast rocket or any of these things, when they go up, after you get up to a certain height, the atmosphere becomes so thick that even if it's not cloudy below you, there's just a lot of soup. The atmosphere makes everything look soupy because it's just a lot of fluid mass below them. And so I think those are the real pictures, is you're just getting this, they're just curving it to make it look curvier. But they are, I think that's what is really there. But these ones where they show the blue sea and all that, that's total artwork. Because I don't think that's what you see when you're way up high. I think you see a lot of milky stuff with a lot of white clouds and pretty heavy clouds. You just don't see much from way up because it's just the atmosphere's just got too much thickness to it. So
Yeah, I mean, that thickness of atmosphere is the same reason that we can't see infinite distances. When you're looking across, you will still reach the vanishing point, but you will also reach the atmospheric interference point that will block your view. And people can't seem to wrap their head around that. And you'll get globe heads saying, well, why can't I see to wherever, some vast distance away? And that soup, as you describe it, is the reason.
Exactly. In fact, what was it? One of the balloons that went up, they were able to see the sun or the moon on the other side of the Earth because they were up above the atmosphere enough to where they could actually see it. So, I think that's what's happening. I think you just can't get a really good shot of the surface. And as far as the sea being blue, that's complete nonsense because the thing is, the sea has a lot of this blue-green algae in it. There should be a gradation of color, like it might be blue in the middle, but it should shift to green, to dark green up in the North Sea. And then finally around the Arctic, the water should be gray because the blue-green algae doesn't live up there. So, I mean, this uniform blue color is like complete nonsense.
Isn't it bioluminescent as well? Wouldn't it glow in the dark?
Does the algae in the warmer tropical climates, I think it does get quite bioluminescent. I've seen that actually when I was visiting Hawaii, where you could see like the bioluminescence in the waves. But it's normally, I think, in the warmer waters that you get that because you just get such a concentration of the algae and the various microorganisms, But there should be a color gradation from one part of the Earth to the other. I mean, it's just this flat blue color they use. Are you kidding me? No. That's not even. And I don't think you could see much of the surface from far away. It would just look kind of cloudy, and maybe you might see a little bit of land, but it would be very misty, just like under a veil of atmosphere. So.
Yeah,
even in the days,
if you're looking out of a plane window, I mean, I know most people will just sit and watch the movie and get their drinks, but I was the guy at the back of the plane at the biggest window trying to get a view. And like you say, what you look down on is this sort of soupy atmosphere that blocks your view, even if you've got a reasonably clear day.
Yeah, and you're not even up that high there. You're still pretty much in the lower stratosphere, so you're not. Like the Go Fast rocket when it went up, right? And you look down, and this is like in the middle of, I think, in New Mexico or Arizona, some desert area. I mean, there's going to be very little water vapor in there, and it still looked milky and like you couldn't see the ground very well. So, forget Britain. They'll never see the land of Britain. It's too cloudy.
Yeah.
Or
I think
here.
the reason we've got these sort of globe Earth proofs is because people like to have a good bead on things and know where they're living and have answers. We've got lots of flat Earth theory, so we've sort of covered a little bit of flat Earth facts, and there is no curve. You can shoot you can get line of sight at 150 miles, but then once you've robbed people of their stolen, I shouldn't use these words, once you've stolen people's explanations for things, that can leave them a little bit freaked out, and the natural progression is to go on to theory. Well, if we're flat, we've obviously got a couple of different answers to what that model is like, and the two main ones in my view are infinite plane theory and dome theory. Which camp would you say you sit in?
Well, I tend to favor the dome theory, but I don't discount the infinite plane theory, because, like I say, until we go out there and reach the edge, we're not going to know it. We really don't know. But just from a religious standpoint, if the Earth is flat, that's the way that God created it, and so there has to be a firmament over it. And I did do a video on that the dome is probably made of a blue sapphire color, probably darker at the top than at the bottom, but it's probably blue. I mean, because the sky is blue, and and also in ancient traditions, the sapphire was called the stone of heaven, and it's incredibly strong crystalline structure. I mean, it would hold forever in its shape. It's paramagnetic. I mean, it's not just like from a biblical standpoint, but a dome or a firmament made of sapphire would be paramagnetic. It would be highly reflective. So, you would get that blue reflection that creates the blue sky. And you would get the ability to transfer the magnetic fields of the Earth back down. And, oh, by the way, if it is a dome, it makes the application of Tesla's theories a lot easier, because you've got a magnetic field that's basically a toroid, like a donut, right? And so then you have the E fields on the Earth would go, let's see, if it's, clockwise, because the North Pole is actually south polarized. So it would go this way. So the actual E field would go clockwise, which kind of tracks with the sun goes in that track as well. So the path of the sun is based on the electromagnetic field of the Earth, or the E field, as opposed to... Does
that E field create harmonics? Does it create...
It could. It would be very low harmonics.
Well, I'm just thinking, because there was a Scrawny to Brawny video on the very first Flat Earth UK. I'd watched it just before this show, and they showed creating in water stars by putting a sound field through this, like a dome of water, although I'm sure that's not relevant, but inside this flask, they just put sound waves through it and created literally a star in a jar. And if what you're saying would create any sort of harmonics in what could potentially be the waters above, that could create our stars, and they could be carried along with that field and the sun and the moon.
It could. And the other thing is it may not be limited to sound waves, because as you increase into higher harmonics, you're getting into RF radio frequency waves, and those are actually even more powerful. Anything that can be done by sonar, if you extrapolate that, it's likely that you could also do that with radio frequency or electromagnetic waves as well. So, there's another possible way to look at it.
Did you see, sorry to cut you off, just reminded me of something. Did you see Tiger Dan's most recent video?
Which one was that? I may have.
It was about... I mean, we're going to get hammered in the comments. I noticed after the last video went up that people really seem to despise anything to do with religion being brought into it. And I think, well, sod ya, we're talking about it. Deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, he was saying that there was a passage that said something along the lines of God had built a tabernacle for the sun. and then he was trying to explain it again by dipping a light in a glass of water, and he connected it to
yes,
the obsidian glass. Have I said that correctly? That
Yeah.
Wakey had been discussing.
Yeah, he put it in a glass of water, a light, and then he did something. Did he subject it to sound waves or something? Or?
No, he was trying to create a similar thing that was created in the link in your video about the sky being blue, which was sundogs.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh, he was showing how you could do sundogs with water. So
sure, but I think what he was actually proposing was that there's like a jar, or if you imagine a light bulb's got a filament in it, and then it has a glass that surrounds it, but the light itself will far exceed the circumference or the size of the bulb that it's in. In other words, the sun could be in some sort of containment, and that could be the obsidian glass that's potentially fallen off and been highlighted by Wakey. I mean, we are so in the realms of theory here, it's untrue, but you know, it's worth
Well, yeah, because the Libyan glass is actually in the Sahara, which is a main track of the sun.
Sorry, what is it called? I got that. I'm sure I got the name wrong.
Libyan glass.
Okay.
They were saying, is that pieces of the dome? And I said, well, no, because the dome would be made of sapphire. The Libyan glass wouldn't have enough structure to it for the dome itself. But yes, if they were to house the sun in something like that, that would work, you know. So maybe it's just pieces of the sun's chamber, as it were.
So you like that? You like that?
Yeah, I thought that was very feasible. You know, I mean, like you say, we don't know anything yet until we either get to the edge or get high enough, or you know, in fact, if the sun is about 30 miles across or 40 miles across, it would be perfectly feasible for it to be an actual fusion reaction within an electromagnetic field containment system. I mean, that'd be perfectly feasible too. I mean, you know,
so it's held up in one of these fields, and it's reacting. In other words, it's not held by anything; it's just suspended by the field itself. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah. In other words, the electromagnetic field is actually suspending it within the Well, the thing is because we have this magnetic field, instead of being like a pole on one end of a globe and a pole on the other end of a globe, right? You've got a flat Earth with this toroid type magnetic field, which is incredibly powerful. It would create a huge E field, you know, running in a clockwise direction.
I love it. The Earth is just a giant speaker magnet. That's right on my street.
But anyway, where were we at? We were discussing some other stuff.
Well, I was going to lead on to sort of, now we've got a bit of theory out of the way, was sort of where you agree or disagree with other people who throw out these sort of wild theories into the flat Earth mix. I mean, I know I've got some strong opinions about people who talk about the Mandela effect because I think it's total hokum. But in terms of general flat Earth theories that are out there, is the people that you fundamentally disagree with, is the people that I know you've gone through a few that you do agree with, but
I don't really strongly disagree with anyone, because the thing is, we don't really know. I mean, it could be an infinite plane. And I think actually because of the way our governments of the world, the powers that be, reacted to whatever they found out there, an infinite plane would be infinitely worse than a dome, because if it's just a dome, they're just hiding God from us, but if it's an infinite plane and they ran into some other people who didn't want us out there, and they said, if you don't keep your people in, you know, we're going to come over and destroy your little puddle over there. You know, they may be technically more advanced than us, and they don't want us, you know, we may be the ghetto trash neighborhood and they don't want us over in their gated community. You know, it could be that simple. I mean, just the fact that they had to keep us in for some reason. You know, if there's an infinite plane, I think there's some very dark things that could be involved in that. But I think the thing is, a lot of people who are ascribing to the infinite plane, it seems to be more appealing to those who don't have any strong religious beliefs, whereas the dome tends to appeal to those who have some religious beliefs or a concept of God, because it does track with, you know, the theology of how God made our world. And so I think that's the big thing. And that's why I think there's so much emotional response to the differences. But, you know, I prefer to stay open-minded about it, you know, because, you know, we don't know. And I think it's wrong to get all in an uproar about it, or, you know.
Sure. I mean, when it comes to the religious aspects of it, do you, like Tiger Dan, find sort of answers from religious texts and then try and back them up, or do you just find that there's a nice parallel between them, as I do? What's your views on the religious texts and so on?
Well, you know, since I'm a Catholic, we have this kind of concept that faith and reason go hand in hand. And in fact, we had a great philosopher, St. Thomas Aquinas, who actually developed the real scientific method long before Francis Bacon. But his idea was that all truth comes from God. So if there is an apparent difference between scientific findings and what we know, and, you know, theology, the reason that you have this difference is because either you don't know enough about science or you don't know enough about theology. So, you know, you just have to keep searching. And so, you know, some people like to start from the Bible and move this way, but I think it's better to stay in the middle and see how they all kind of flow together over time, you know, and I think it's a much more interesting way to discover things. So without discounting the Bible and theology and that sort of thing, but also accepting that science can bring us to both theological truth and theology can bring us an insight into scientific truth. So that's my view.
But now you've got, you know, flat Earth in your veins. I mean, it's one where it's never going to be a cult. It's always going to be a self-realization. But now you have this self-realization. Will you expand it out to more of your social circles? Do you think, like with church, it's very much self-contained and has a home and a building, as much as a Christian would probably get really annoyed at me phrasing it like that. But to keep it simple, you can keep it in a certain place. Whereas with flat Earth, I find myself itching to tell people. Do you think you'll move into being a bit more of a flat Earth missionary, or do you think you'll keep it under your hat in public?
Well, I think it's very interesting, but I think some people aren't just ready for it yet. The way I've done it is by just pointing out little things, and that makes them think. And then and I can gauge by their reaction if they're ready for more. Like, one of the things I've been doing is like showing people, do you know that the moon has a cold light, right? And that gets them thinking about, well, the moon is not just getting its light by reflecting off the sun. There's something else going on here. So it makes them realize that the world may be more than they know it to be. And so that at that point, if they're more accepting, then you can discuss other things with them. So that's kind of, I usually start with the moon has a cold light, because that's kind of an interesting little phenomenon there. So
it's not the totally blunt flat Earth spray in your face, you know. How open-minded do you think you are? You know, none of that.
Yeah, I'm not going to pull a Mark Sargent. No.
No,
But
it's a bit cruel, you know, to rock someone's world, because I do think it's true that some people just cannot cope with it.
Well, and I don't understand why, because the emotional response that I had when I put down those binoculars after observing that there was no curvature on the Earth, the emotional response that I had was a deep feeling of peace, because all of a sudden I'm not on this madly spinning ball, madly spinning around the Earth and hurtling through the galaxy and blowing through the universe at these insane speeds. I was at a perfect point of stillness. And there was such a peace in that. And I think eventually that would, you know, it would start to appeal to people eventually, but they've just got to get out of their embrace of the madness. You know.
Can you remind us of some of these speeds that we're not experiencing?
Well, yeah. I mean, what is it? We're moving at 1,000 miles an hour on the Earth itself, and then I can't remember. I added them up.
67,000 miles an hour around the sun.
Yeah, and then it gets worse from there. By the time you're
500,000 miles an hour around a black hole, we've never proven.
Yeah, by the time you start blowing around the galaxy, you're actually exceeding the speed of light, which you shouldn't be able to do. You know, and all of a sudden,
you're keeping it with CERN. I mean, we've got the morphing neutrinos. Is it more? No, not morphing. What's the word they used? It was a really up-to-date, modern. What's the word? Shape-shifting neutrinos.
Oh, that I think is absolute bull. But
I think all of it's bull.
Yeah, well, the thing is I don't think they can exceed the speed of light.
No, they can't. They've said that though. They have said they can't.
Yeah. So why are they spending all this money to try to get faster? Because they're not going to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. So, you know.
We touched on this last time, but you could probably tell from looking down the barrel of my camera that I was so distracted scurrying around while you were playing it cool and kept chatting. But, you know, we touched on CERN and Mandela last time, but you've got my full attention this time.
Well, I mean, like you said, I'm not sure, but there seems to be something there. And I think there's a relationship between the Mandela effect and CERN, only because nobody seems to have noticed all this until they started firing up CERN back in early 2010. And I think that, but the thing is because I was very concerned the first time they fired it up, because they were trying to create the initial conditions of the universe by rapidly accelerating exotic particles at each other and create that. Those initial conditions were horrendously unstable for the time-space continuum. Okay, so
but words like time-space continuum
or the fabric,
loaded Hollywood words.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fabric of the universe, or like reality as we know it, right?
Reality as we know it. We've got a trailer going already.
I don't really know if there are alternate realities, but I think it is possible that CERN could have screwed with our reality, you know, by pulling off these experiments. If they did have some kind of an effect that was close to the initial conditions of the universe, it could create ripples, and the kinds of things that you see in the Mandela effect would be the side effects of such an operation. So I'm just saying it's possible it's related. Again,
I mean, but to me, that's exactly what they want you to think. All of these things are tied into the science that they're looking into. You know, that's what they're studying. So obviously you're right, and you can't not be wrong. That's exactly what they're doing. So while I laugh at it, that is the science of CERN at the end of the day.
Well, and I don't even understand why CERN gets so much. Where are they getting support from? Because I don't think anybody wants CERN to do that. I mean, I know in our country, when they were going to fire it up, there were a number of physicists that were very concerned. So, you know, they were saying, this is a bad idea, don't do this. And they went ahead and did it anyway. So who is supporting this? Because I can't imagine anybody really wanting them to try to blow up our universe, you know. I mean,
again, I have to play devil's advocate to a certain extent, because you can't assume that people like NASA and Matt Powell did a good job of explaining the sort of stuff that they are doing and how it gets done. And, you know, while someone thinks that they might be designing a part for a satellite and it ends up being used on a high altitude aerosol deployment unit, you know, it's not necessarily the case that what they're designing, and they are designing stuff, you know, there is scientific work going on. There's nothing to say that CERN is any different. And I'm sure they are doing, you know, some research. But the reality is that we've been fooled by the same twisted lies. And when you started, you said, well, they're looking at the beginning of time and, you know, the start of the Big Bang and all of this. And you think, well, this concept reminds me of something, and it's something that's only just recently rocked my world, which is flat Earth. And I think that's very deliberate. Even Insanity is Sanity posed the question, well, could the flat Earth be a result of the Mandela effect? And I mean, I didn't put the camera on me, but I was grinning like an idiot on the other end, thinking, I'm really glad I've led you down this path, because I want that part of it to come out and be realized, so I can say, no, absolutely not. You know, I don't.
It's funny because because my sister asked me the same thing when I was telling her about the flat Earth and the Mandela effect, and she says, "Do you think the Mandela or the CERN caused the flat Earth to go flat?" And I go,
No, the Earth's always been flat. I mean, I'm lucky because I'm very observant and I've kept my eyes open my whole life, and I know what the Earth looked like, and absolutely nothing has changed in my life. Nothing. You know, people start looking up at the stars and going, you know what? They twinkle. I know there's that song Twinkle Twinkle, but I never noticed them twinkle before. And you think, well, yeah, you never noticed, but they've always twinkled.
Twinkled, yeah. Yeah, they've always been sparkly. But I think too, like I've always kind of, you know, and subconsciously I've known that there was a flat Earth, because people say, well, I go up in an airplane, I can see the curve. I says, no, I've flown in a lot of airplanes over my life, and I have never seen a curve ever. No, so
there isn't one, you know, that's the bottom line, and you can't see it because it isn't there. I like looking at the photos on people's Facebook. That's my favorite little poke, to poke people on it. And you know, there's no curve. You know, when they've all got their photo out of the wing.
Yeah.
There's the curve I can't see again.
I think that eventually it's going to start getting out. I think we're almost at what you call the 100th monkey level. You know, where we're to the point where, if you've noticed, flat Earth is just blowing across all the other conspiracy theories. I mean, it's like they're all getting annoyed because we're getting all the attention these days. You know, I mean, I think it's just funny and I think they've run out of arguments against the flat Earth because it's too easy for people to observe that the Earth is flat.
It's farcical to think that they haven't considered that and haven't got a backup plan in place for a very long time. And in the same way, none of us can achieve the perspective of these photographs they present us to prove us with the ball. None of us can go underground and see what's going on at CERN, and they've got to have a next slide coming from somewhere, and you can only look at all of the things that are placed in the media on a daily basis to plant ideas of the globe, and they're running concurrently with ideas of time travel. To me, all CERN is a giant version of the flux capacitor. It's just a nonsense type designed to convince us we can time travel.
It's possible. And well, and the other thing too, I've noticed that as flat Earth is gaining ground, they are doing a lot more of these staged shootings and violence, and you know, it's like I mean, they're really stepping it up. They're getting desperate, I think.
You watch I sort of dabble in KJ, is it Scariest Movie Ever? You ever heard of that guy?
No.
He's got a channel that sort of, he dissects almost moment for moment these false flags, or whatever you want to call them. But he does a lot of research, and it's scary. You know, I'll only dabble in it because he calls it Scariest Movie Ever because it's just real life he's looking at, and he's just laying it out there. And you know, this stuff's happening all over the place to incite World War III, and that element of it terrifies me, especially if it is as a result of the momentum that the flat Earth is getting.
Well, I don't know if we're the only problem children for the powers that be, but it just seems like they're escalating a lot of this, and they're trying to distract everybody with these, you know, one sensational scene after another and after another, to the point where I'm not even watching them. I mean, it's like, yeah. You know, it's just too much like a false flag over and over and over again. And I don't know what the effect of that is, but I do think that if the message on the flat Earth does get out, that everybody's going to have that experience, and this is not going to work for the powers that be, because they want to keep us all jacked up and worried and hyper and you know, scared and all that. But when you put down the binoculars and you realize that you're standing in a perfect point of stillness, all of a sudden, peace, right? So if everybody in the world starts getting this feeling of peace, it's going to change things a lot.
Or it could be back to, I mean, I know this is, we should have maybe covered this in the dome versus infinite plane theory, but if you have a slight rephrasing of infinite plane and just call it more land, and then track back through time and realize that we've been lied to about the amount of land before, it seems to make sense that forget how much there is beyond the ice wall and just accept that there's a possibility they're hiding land from us, that changes things again. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, actually, yes. There may even be more land in the far south regions that we may not even be aware of. I mean, look at the Indian Ocean. It's huge, and there's nothing out there. It's just nothing, you know.
So yeah, there could be another race of people. There could be a whole another continent that we've not discovered potentially, and we're just not being told about it. And we don't want, you know, another influx of another race. I have no idea. I'm totally speculating. But when you phrase it more land rather than infinite plain, it does make you think.
Yeah, well, and the other thing too is we don't know much about the far south regions of the Earth, let alone Antarctica, because once we started exploring down there, or really moving out, because the oceans are so vast that it seems like, all of a sudden now they got Loran and the GPS, and they're just kind of moving us where they want us to go. So, and that's why some of these people who are interested in actually exploring the south regions, more the lower South Pacific, the lower Indian Ocean, the southern Indian Ocean, they're saying if we want to really explore it, we're going to have to go back to the astrolabe and the sextant to do our navigation, because you won't be able to rely on GPS and Loran, because they'll move you around like a chess piece.
Or even compasses. Before the show started, you were talking about a video that you'd watched.
Yes, I just saw a movie. Martin Liedtke, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, posted a video on. It was actually a documentary that was done in the late 50s or early 60s sometime, and it was about Operation High Jump, and it was a very long documentary. They had cameramen, embedded with all the military that went down there. You got to see, the voyage, getting through the ice, what they did down there, all kinds of politically incorrect things like hunting seals and slaughtering them, and I mean, this is back when we, a land of burgers and cheap gas, and so, but it was really interesting. And one of the things that I found very interesting was that they couldn't get the magnetic compasses to work properly in the region of Antarctica. They had to actually rely on a solar compass where you use the sighting of the sun. It's an old Viking tool almost, because they didn't, that they used before.
How would that fit in? You described as like a toroid shape. I mean, can you picture that and sort of talk that through? I know I'm just asking you off the top of your head, but
well, the compass does point to magnetic north, and I think it would still do that down there. If there was a toroid, if there was a dome, I mean, if it was an infinite plane, it would be less likely there would be a problem with the compass. But if there was a dome, the dome would be very close, so you'd have like the toroid of the magnetic field coming down. Or the other thing could be was, they'd say, well, the compass says we should be here, but we're not there yet because it's a lot further around the Antarctica than they realize. And so they think their compass must not be working, And so there's that too. It could be that it was working, but they just didn't think it was because they couldn't navigate by it down there, because they were assuming they were on a globe, and until they found whatever they found. And
was that the Challenger? Was it in the 1800s that was essentially circumnavigating Antarctica? I'm sure they said it was something like 76,000 miles that it covered in about 3 years. Huge distance.
Yeah, 60,000 or something like that. Yeah, 60,000 miles or 60-something thousand miles. But
yeah, they claim to be like 20 or 30 miles off the coast of Antarctica.
Yeah, and of course now we can't do that because,
Well, we've got the Antarctic Treaty, so.
Yeah, you can't go below 60 degrees south, so, which is a lot of part of the Earth. I mean, 60 degrees south and lower is a huge amount of the globe, and it's all locked up, I mean, that's just outrageous to me.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Matt Bowland summed it up when he pointed at the camera and said they'll stop you at gunpoint and say you can go no further. That's basically what it boils down to. We're not allowed to go.
Oh no, and they do. They fly the air forces of the world fly missions around the perimeter and everything to make sure that nobody gets in. So, you know, what are they hiding? Are they hiding an infinite plane? Are they hiding a dome? You know.
I mean, I speculated that we're prisoners. We're trapped here.
But
yeah, I mean, you mentioned the powers that be, and again, back to your 115-mile shot. You were told to take that down. Now,
well, one of the things is when my commander was talking to me, he was down at the main headquarters with the. I mean, he may not have known why they didn't want this kind of thing to become more common, but because I mean, if I could do it there, people could do it other places, right? And we could save a lot of radio equipment.
well, we haven't highlighted this yet. We did on the previous one, the one that's been edited onto the cutting room floor at Google, but you had a certain distance that you were supposed to achieve, which coincidentally was the same as the approximate curvature that should be in the way. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. But he might have not known what the problem was, but he was down there with some very high-ranking generals. We're talking one of the main NATO headquarters there. So
okay.
So there may have been some people says, no, we need to take that down. So, you know, I mean, it could have been.
I suspect that, you know, that when you've got a compartmentalized situation, you're never going to have the guy who's telling off the individual who's managed to just prove the Earth is flat, knowing that that's the reason. That would make no sense at all.
Oh, exactly. Well, I'm sure, but you know, like I say, it may have. I don't want to speculate, but he was down there with some fairly high-ranking people. You know, I mean, we'd have General Haig come down through there occasionally, even. So he was very high-ranking. So.
Well, these are the powers that be. I mean, there's got to be a stage where people know the score and know what's being hidden and why, and things like your 115-mile shot proving there's not, what did you say, it was about a mile of curvature that should be blocking that transmission?
Yeah, 5,800 feet, and that's including adding in a compensation for 4/3 curvature of the Earth with the rate.
I totally trust your maths. I mean, a mile is a mile to me. That's a lot of curve. Yeah. A lot of curve should have been in the way of that transmission, but you got a perfect signal, perfect gain, clear as day, and even phoned the guy to tell him that it worked perfectly, and his response was,
I don't like it. I don't like it. That's all he said. Take it down.
Yeah, we can't have anything proving the Earth is flat.
Well, and there's so many ways to prove it. That's how can they hide the world from us forever? I think maybe I mean, just if you see the lame way that they do the live feed on the ISS these days, it's like they're almost just getting tired of trying to cover it up. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just.
Well, again, I've speculated that there's a controlled demolition going on, and that we are, to a certain degree. I mean, I know even just by the language we use in these conversations, it's going to be putting a spin that we don't want it to. You know, we're trying to convince people that open your eyes, the world is flat. You've only got to look at it. And just in the nature of speaking about it, we'll be using words that will be convincing them of the complete opposite just by speaking. You know, it's a crazy level of deception that we're dealing with. And to me, the next level has to be in place. It has to be things like simulation theory or multidimensional theory or time travel. And these are the things that tie back into the Mandela effect. I know, you know, that you've always got to be able to sort of think, yeah, I'll look at these avenues. And I'm lucky that long before Flat Earth, I sort of looked at, dissected up and discounted a lot of these theories, only to then see them be broadcast to us from CERN. You know, it's mad.
Well, the other thing too is, you know, the way I've been trying to communicate, even though I'm not very good at doing videos yet, but I'm committed to keep doing videos, you know, showing the facts, showing the numbers, because that apparently, like I say, the last video I put out, and it wasn't that good. I have trouble doing them very professionally, but I mean, the number, it had to have had an impact, because I mean, the shills jumped on it within minutes of uploading it. And I mean, and really, they were freaking out. And so, you know, things like this, when people post these things, it's going to start snowballing eventually. I mean, right now, I think when I went out to check, if you type in flat earth on a YouTube search, you will get about, I think it was almost up to 1.7 million hits. You know, that's pretty monumental. And you know, and everybody's, you know, like, I post a video and then somebody gets an idea from my video, and then they post something and I get an idea from theirs, you know, just like today, when, you know, I mean, you see all these things. And this Antarctica one that was just found, you know, this Antarctica video, your feed didn't drop, did it?
I was just checking.
We said the A word.
Now, we've covered it a little bit. We've tackled a little bit of Antarctica. I mean, maybe there's something else. I mean, it might just be my suspicion that it's because we're talking about Antarctica. But in the same vein, I'm saying there's no reason to suspect. There's no reason not to suspect that this has been subtly pushed into their daily, you know, grind of YouTube, so that it comes up on people's suggestions and are slowly woken up to it in the conspiracy world, and then the mainstream world will come later. But that's only going to be true if there's another layer of deception. And I mean, I'll keep saying it, because I definitely think it's true now. The more and more I think about it, you know, just from just the sheer level of predictive programming they put into the media for the globe matches perfectly with the amount of predictive programming they put in for, you know, what I would consider to be simulation theory, but all of your time travel and your multi-dimensional stuff. There's loads and loads and loads of it. You know, the more I look for it, the more obvious it's becoming to me. But
well,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm more optimistic for one reason, is that what we're observing is what is actually really around us. So there's a realness to it that they can't like blow it off as just simulation.
a flat Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, sorry, don't want to get anybody confused. The Earth is flat. We definitely didn't go to the moon, but we may not live in a computer or live in a parallel universe, or have had things changed because someone went back in time and changed them, because CERN is going to become a time traveling whatnot in the next 5 years or so.
Well, like I say, I've seen some things, but I don't know how to explain them. But you know, I'm just saying it could be related to CERN. You know.
Yeah, I just think there's always a simple explanation, and it's in human beings' nature to want an explanation where they may not be able to get one at all ever. You know, often there is an explanation, but it just takes some time to find. And in the meantime, people will use conjecture or theory, and sometimes it's so crazy. I see the Mandela effect as so farcical now, you know, but people will still dabble in it, and you just think, well, why? You know, there's a rational explanation for 99% of what you've looked at if you just did a little bit of, you know, Sherlock Holmes work. But instead it's like, no, CERN, maybe, and you can't go, well, I can't be as bold as to say no, because that would be arrogant. And, you know, yeah, it's a possibility, but really, come on.
Well, we don't really know. I don't think we have enough evidence one way or the other at this point about it. But
yeah, I'd completely agree with that. You know, there's nothing to point us towards it, though. That would be my balance.
But I think our focus needs to be on, you know, like you say, communicating. I'm finding that the best way to communicate is with the videos. Like I'm working on one for satellites now, with, you know, and like you say, it fits very well into this video by GeoShifter. And you know, they kind of beat me up about my gravity on the ISS one, and there are some things that, yeah, they could justify it with numbers, but the problem is once they justify that with numbers, their next level of numbers are impossible too, because you know, like for the ISS to be in free fall now, it would have to go at such insanely fast speeds that even in the thermosphere, the leading edges of the ISS would be heating up, and why aren't they melting? So, that's my next question. I'm working on some numbers for that using drag coefficient and things like that. And there's a heating coefficient. I actually got it from a government website. FAA, Federal Aviation Agency, had some aerodynamics reference books PDFs that you could download, and so I got some good information there. And why is it? It should be melting. I mean, it's blowing it along at 7,795 meters per second in the middle of the thermosphere, where the atoms are heated to 2,000 degrees, right? And sure, the atoms may be highly rarefied, but you create localized pressure areas when you're moving at that speed. And so those atoms that are superheated are going to create pressure on the leading edges of the ISS as it's barreling around at almost 8,000 meters per second, and why isn't it melting? It should be melting.
Or to boil it down into a bit of a statement, what they say is up there is a nonsense.
Oh yeah, it is. It just I don't see feasibly how it could work, from the numbers,
And the Mark Sargent had a statement given to him. I mean, again, unfortunate. I don't know if he's had the guy on as a guest since, but he read out a statement from an industrial valve and seal expert who was basically running through the nonsense that is the day-to-day functionality of the ISS, and again pointing out that essentially what they say is taking place up there could only take place if every single valve and seal was undergoing continual daily maintenance, and there's nothing of the sort taking place up there. What they're actually doing, cut to the video of the
the guitar. the guitar.
Yeah, exactly. It's a farce. It's the ISS is a nonsense. But to bring it back down to Earth, if you like, give me a sort of a bold statement about satellites. Forget the ISS, but what's your take on what's actually there or not there, if you know what I mean?
Well, when I was in signal school, we went through all the orbital mechanics of satellites and how you communicate, communication satellites. And for the communication satellites are supposed to be, if they exist, should be at 2,324 miles above the Earth in a geostationary orbit right at the equator, and is as near circular as possible. And the thing is, you have to get to a certain speed to do that. Basically, they're almost into escape velocity. That's why they're up so high. And so they don't have to be maintained. Theoretically, that's the way it works. And those numbers were given to me when I was a young lieutenant going through signal school. And, you just accept them, And then I started looking at it, and I took first of all, I thought about some satellite shots that I did when I was in the military. Again, rethinking the numbers I was given back then, and did some calculations. And the satellites are basically pointing between 1,000 miles, 600 miles to 1,000 miles. So it's like, in the upper thermosphere to the exosphere. So they're not that high up, and as opposed to what I was taught, that they're 22,324 miles in the air. And so, I even did this with my little TV satellite dish out here. I measured the angle of elevation and did some trigonometry and figured out, yep, it's pointing at about 1,000 miles up if you're pointing at the equator where all the communication satellites are supposed to be. And the thing is the satellite communications is in the gigahertz range. So I thought it could be ionospheric skipping, where they're skipping off the ionosphere, because it's the same frequency, and the dishes actually look the same too. So, or they could be using some kind of troposphere scatter, but the dishes would be the same. The frequencies are about the same. So they could be doing it that way. But this one video that GeoShifter put out, where he said with these helium-filled ultra lightweight tanks, it would put them in about the same range. So maybe that's what we're pointing at, is these kind of very high-tech weather balloons.
Sort of the same sort of thing that Google are planning on putting up there.
Yeah, exactly. The Google-loon or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is all very suspect. And again, Jeranism's done a really fine job of pointing out this ludicrousy. You know, you've got satellites. What do we need these balloons for? It's a nonsense.
Well, yeah, and the only thing you would need to overcome if you're using radios is the mountaintops, really. And so that might require a certain angle pointing up, but you know, you can have relays there. We don't know where this is actually going. I mean, if I do the trigonometry, I have a rough idea where the dish is connecting to, but you know, there are variables in there. But look, basically, if they're somewhere down at the equator, we're talking 600 miles to 1,000 miles. So let's say GeoShifter, he says there's got to be a reason why they're building all these things. They're making money from it, you know. I mean, if it's just totally useless, you know, spare parts thrown together in a module, you know. But he says these people seem pretty serious about it, so.
Sure.
You know.
I mean, you said about when you did your most recent video about the fakery of the gravity on the ISS. Got you a lot of attention instantly from the trolls. Well, when I made my third or fourth video, I just put it was about the third incarnation of the same subject. By the third video, I really wanted to see if it was the thing I was saying that was getting the attention it was. So I boiled it right down to satellites don't exist. And the trolls went absolutely insane. So I was like, well, obviously I'm onto something here for them to go so nuts over it. But can you boil it down to a statement that's as bold as that?
I don't know. Maybe GeoShifter's right. I can't say they don't exist as we know them. I know that, but there's something going. There may be something going on there. Like I say, I need to do a little more research. I'm hesitant to make a huge bold statement until I've done the numbers. You know.
Sure. I mean, but when we told us, I mean, I'm sure the last number I saw was something like 15,000. Forget that these aren't the. Did you say they were geostationary?
The ones that are supposed to be there are 22,324 miles. That's much above everything else we have running up and down there. It's way above space shuttle.
What would you call that? What would you give that? What was its name?
It's called a geostationary orbit. It's a near
geostationary. I'm glad you said. I thought that was what you said. The reason this is a bit of a ham-handed segue into a bit of a chat about psychopaths,
okay.
Well, yeah, on one of my videos, I called it geostationary, and somebody went, no, you're not allowed to call it geostationary. That's not the proper English term for it. You're supposed to call it geosynchronous.
Well, yes, because if the Earth is turning, right, then that means that the satellite is turning with it. But it's an apparent geostationary orbit. They must be really getting worried about the fact that the Earth isn't moving, because if they call it geosynchronous, because it is technically, if the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, then the satellites are spinning at 1,000 miles an hour too.
It's back to the language. It's back to,
yeah, exactly.
If we're talking about something and we're using the correct grammar and the correct spelling and the correct phrasing, then the spells, and when people talk about, you know, I don't know, I don't want to get into the hokum that people and the nonsense that people talk about, because I'll start perpetuating myself. But when I talk about spells, I literally mean spelling, if you know what I mean. And if you spell, you know, if when you're talking about satellites, if you call them geostationary, or, you know, that creates a very bad impression. Whereas if you call them geosynchronous, it's a lot more convincing of globes and things spinning around.
Yeah, well, the thing that I think why you get if you look at the things where you get the worst response to your videos, right? It's all wrapped around NASA. That's why I think a lot of these trolls are coming. They're directly NASA prompted. Because
you think they're NASA trolls?
I think they are, because if you attack something like satellites don't exist, who's the main controller of satellites?
Yeah.
If you say there's something wrong with the ISS, who's that?
Yeah, NASA. It's all NASA.
Yeah, if you say the moon landings didn't happen,
it's NASA.
NASA. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if if the worst attacks come from the people, come from the subjects that where one organization has the most to lose over it, right? Then, I mean, you kind of have, logically, it seems that would be where these people are coming from. I mean,
true. But I think there's many more levels to it. I mean, I noticed this just literally last night, and it's something that I'd seen 1,000 times, and everyone will have a little light bulb appear up over their head. But on an iPad, when you look at any list of videos, next to the end of the title and the little preamble that YouTube give underneath, there's a tiny little globe. And the reason it's there is to let you know that the video is published globally, and that's the symbol. But it's literally, scroll through every single time you go to click on a video on the iPad, you've got a little globe there just to remind you that you're on a globe. I even did a little video and they took it down immediately. I'd love to think it was in reaction to my video. But on, let's look at it, just above the top left-hand corner of your YouTube page on a PC, it says YouTube, and then left of that, there's the little menu, like 3 lines. Well, they had a little animation that changed it into a globe. So it went into a globe and then went into a little dog. So I quickly caught it with my phone and published it and going, look, YouTube are here reminding us all again that we're on a globe. And immediately it got taken down. That was fascinating to see the way we were programmed.
Is it, did they say, did they use the iPhone as an excuse or something like that, or the iPhone screen?
The iPhone, the very first one, had the blue marble, didn't it, as its lock screen?
Yes, it did. Yeah, yeah.
They've started to use that trick again, I noticed. So the iPad Plus, or whatever it's called, the giant iPad, they had an advert with all of the, it was just comical, just sort of flat discs of NASA artwork on every shot. Did you see that ad?
No, I didn't. But I thought what was funny was that Mark Sargent debated that Mike Fetzer the other night. He is a firm believer that all that NASA's doing is complete fakery. But yet, when Mark Sargent, or no, it wasn't Mark Sargent, it was what's his name, Dave Weiss, right, was debating Michael Fetzer the other, I think that's his name, but it was a funny debate because this guy, they had in common that they think all the NASA stuff is complete fakery, right?
So they agree on that.
They agree on that, but then Mark Sargent says it's because the Earth is flat, and so this guy, in order to build his argument that the Earth was a globe, right, he used NASA photos. You just said these guys were fakes, so why are you using their photos of the Earth? I mean.
Yeah, Bart Sabral's got a similar story, and people will sort of attack Bart Sabral, the guy who exposed that they took, fake pictures of the Earth from space.
Oh, well, yeah, with the window and all that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, people sort of attack him because he's not a flat earther, and my immediate response to that would be, well, the programming that you've broken to become a flat earther is so strong, and the fact that there's many people who are still under it, you see people all the time that you'll tell about this and they'll slightly get it and then try and ignore it, and it's because it's so easy to sink back into the programming and have it subconsciously delude you that you're on a globe again. It's mad.
Well, I think that people have, like, to go back to religion, but people have Judeo-Christian beliefs, right? Because the way that the creation is described in the Bible, right? I think that made it very easy for me, because of my Christian beliefs, to say, yes, it's exactly the way it's described in the Bible. God made it exactly.
That's exactly how I viewed it.
Yeah, I mean, it was an easy move for me. But I think if you do not have sincere Judeo-Christian beliefs, it might be like, if you're a secularist or even kind of a hardcore atheist, it might be really hard to.
Because then you've got nothing to, in a way, if you've got a Christian upbringing, or I had an upbringing that was Christian, but a lot of people in Britain will have been to Christian schools and have had some of this information planted in them at a subliminal level, an unconscious level, because it's gone in at such an early age. But having that means at least you've got some answers, which stops you cracking up.
Yeah, well, exactly, because if you didn't have these Christian beliefs that you know, especially if it's a domed world, because all of a sudden, you know, if you have Christian beliefs, you're saying it's exactly the way God made it. He made it, created this for us to make it nice for us, to protect us, to give us a nice habitable place to live. But if you're a secularist or an atheist, that dome is just a prison. It's enclosing you, it's trapping you, and you're going to feel trapped and enclosed, and it's going to be hard to accept, you know. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, there was one other subject that I wanted to touch on before we wrap up in maybe about 5 minutes time.
Fire
and that
away.
was the flat earth mockery that we get subjected to, either from people who still firmly believe we live on a globe, and on another level, these sort of infighting, if you want to call it. I mean, what's your feelings when people are vicious to you in a comment feed?
Well, you know, it's funny because I used to get a little bit upset about it, but then I realized, you know, as I was saying to you before, if you're getting close to the target, you're going to catch flack. So if you're going for the truth, you're going to get a lot of anti-aircraft weaponry pointed at you or whatever. You know, you're flying along.
You're hitting a nerve. That's doing something right, not wrong.
And I don't really have a lot of animosity towards these people. I mean, some people get more upset than I do about things they say to me, but to me.
Oh, right. How do you mean?
Oh, I've seen people say, "Don't talk to her like that," and I say, "I don't care." You know, I just ignore these people anyway.
The other commenters, yeah, they can be really sweet. Sometimes it's so touching.
Yeah, but I just look at the trolls and just say, well, you know, I kind of feel sorry for them. They're kind of pathetic figures, you know. I mean, most of them I think are guys that need girlfriends or something, you know. You know, they have nothing in their lives, but they just spew negativity. You know, I mean, it's kind of sad and pathetic. You know,
so how do you deal with the commenters? I know you've only just started making these videos, but what's your response to them?
I ignore them. Completely ignore them.
Ignore them.
Don't even respond to them. Don't feed the trolls, you know.
Oh, I feed the trolls. I've got a really big cage. I like bundling them all in. Put them to work.
But I think the thing that makes me more upset is when you have a lot of infighting among the people in the flat earth community. You know, what is the point? We don't know really yet. We can't sit there. You're sitting there arguing about a different theory versus a different theory. Until you really know, it's kind of, you know, pointless. I don't get it. I don't know why they need to make such a big deal.
A nice way to wrap up the show then, in that case, Robin. Could it maybe run us through some nice flat earth facts so we can all focus on reality at the end of the show?
Oh, okay. Well, I thought I already gave some numbers, but I do want to.
I mean numbers, but it's just one. Another way to put it is, let's just summarize what we've said to people. You know, I'm happy to point out that the Earth is flat all day.
Can I repeat one more time about keeping a notebook? Everybody needs to keep a notebook in the flat Earth community, whether it's, you know, like me with calculations in geometry or journals, because these things in the future are become important. So I'll just add that, and I'll just also finish up with my best observations of the flat Earth. Number one, where is the curvature? That is your best argument. Show me the curvature. There is no curve. Yeah. And secondly, look where the horizon is. Look at the sun. Does it look like it's 93 million miles away, or does it look close? Does it behave like it's 93 million miles away, or is it close? Look at the moon. Why does it have a cold light? And these kinds of things. All these things that we can observe that tell us every day that the Earth is flat.
Yeah, and just to answer those semi-rhetorical questions, there is no curve, and the sun's very close. So, Robin Poe, you've been an absolutely superb guest. I know it's been a second time around, but thank you ever so much for doing Flat Earth UK for a second time.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's just a pleasure to talk to you. So anytime again, it'd be great.
You'll always be welcome. The pleasure was all mine. And to all the people in the comments, yeah, thank you so much for joining us on Flat Earth UK. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.